Welcome to the Navigating Hollywood podcast. My name is Alan Wolf, and I'm a filmmaker and an author. Navigating Hollywood helps media professionals build holistic, creative, and spiritual lives through this podcast, book clubs, and discussion groups at the major studios. If you work in entertainment, visit navigatinghollywood.org to discover how you can get involved. I'm thrilled to welcome an extraordinary talent whose versatility and passion have made her a standout across film, television, and theater. She seamlessly transitions between dramatic and comedic roles with amazing authenticity, and she currently stars in Netflix's murder mystery series, The Residents. From her breakout role as Tosh in HBO's The Wire, to her Independent Spirit Award-nominated performance in Free Indeed, Edwina has built an impressive career spanning drama, comedy, and everything in between. A classically trained artist from the Duke Ellington School of the Arts and NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, she has performed on prestigious stages across the country while continuing to shine on screen in productions like The Power, Fear the Walking Dead, and Veep. Welcome, Edwina.
Thank you so much, Alan. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Your new series, The Residents, is a murder mystery at the White House where you bring to life Sheila Cannon. And I heard she's a pretty flawed White House butler. Is that correct?
She's extremely flawed. In fact, when I read the script the first time, I wondered, how did she get this job? She's an alcoholic and is a person that tells her mind and tells it like it is, but she's filled with joy and dreams. And I think in her imagination, she's probably the first lady, and that everyone else just thinks she's the butler. But in actuality, I think we believe that she's really the one running the place. And so she has a lot of great comedic roles and scenes, but there's also places where, you uncover the layers and are able to get to her vulnerability and sort of be able to understand why she is the way she is.
Well, tell us about the cast. It sounds like an amazing cast.
Oh, it's a wonderful cast. The cast is led by Uzo Aduba, who Uzo and I go way back to New York theater days. Also, Susan Kelechi Watson, and we too have known each other for a long time from NYU and New York. And Isaiah Whitlock, who I've known for a long time. We did The Wire together. There's Randall Park, who's an incredible actor in both comedy and drama. Ken Marino. How can I forget Giancarlo Esposito, who I first became aware of when I was in college studying at Atlantic Theater Company, and he was one of the company members there, again, in New York theater. So I just feel like they've assembled just a wonderful cadre of artists, some of whom you very much know, some you may not know as well, but who all deliver phenomenal performances in the show.
It's amazing that you have worked with several of them before.
Yeah, well, actually, a lot of them I had not worked with. A lot of them we just knew each other for many years, or had become close in different ways. There's a couple that I even met at church, and that's where we met. And, had never though worked together. So it's been really wonderful for our artistic paths to now have crossed and been able to work together. And then there's one actor, how can I forget, Bronson Pinchot, who I grew up watching on Perfect Strangers, who plays the incredible White House chef in this one, Didier Gottard, and he's super funny in this too.
And what was it like working with Shonda Rhimes to bring your character to life?
I've always been a Shonda Rhimes fan. I mean, I think I really became passionate about her work starting with Scandal. I was a huge Scandal fan. I loved the character, the writing, the language, these Shakespearean, monologues that would go on for pages and pages. And as an actor, I just got so much excitement out of that. Like those words are like heaven to me. Now, fast forward to be working on a Shondaland series that she did not write, but she's producing, and it's all under the Shondaland banner. But it's written by a brilliant writer named Paul William Davies. And he wrote on Scandal. He also had another Shondaland show called For the People. And so his style is very similar. So it's extremely witty. It's just brilliant. The language is brilliant. The character is fantastic. Like, you guys are going to be really in for a treat.
How does your approach differ when tackling a character like Sheila versus your more dramatic roles?
It's funny because in some ways I approach the roles the same. Maybe it was because I got my start on The Wire, and The Wire is a very cinema verite style of show, right? So it's all about like the authenticity of Baltimore and the people that live there. And in that show is very unique because there was a combination of actors and real people from that place and who had lived this life, combined with these very trained actors all coming together. And the same with Treme that we did a few years later, also with David Simon, who's a phenomenal writer and creator of the show. So I guess it was something about that being my entryway into television, that I've kind of kept that approach through roles. Even I've done roles that are soapy and like, whatever, but I always try to approach it from the lens of a real person, from a real, almost like it's a biopic in and of itself. So with Sheila, even though she was so extremely funny, she's so super funny, but for me, it was important to create, a three-dimensional human being.
Mm.
So even with all her jokes and all her banter and all these things, I was still looking for what is that drama underneath, right? Like if she's an alcoholic or she's a chain smoker or she has, a tenuous relationship with the truth, right? I'm thinking like, okay, what is underneath her? And I approach it like that. So there are lots of moments that are very, very comedic, but then there's also some areas of the show where it's where she takes the layers off, you know what I mean? And where it gets really deep and very personal. And that was really important to me too. So yeah, I kind of approach them the same, but with comedy, it's kind of like you can't take yourself too seriously, right? Like in drama, you might be going to the depth, inner depth. You can do that sometimes with comedy, right? Especially if there's those types of scenes written in. But then it's also like, okay, yes, you want to bring the humor, right? And then some things are more intense, but that's one of the things I learned, going through drama school. It's like one of the differences between drama and comedy is like with comedy, it might be frustration and not anger, right? Like you
Mhm.
kind of have to negotiate like the degree to which you go into a particular emotion so that it does not lose its humor. Right. And so that's one thing I love about Sheila. Like I don't think she loses her humor even in those moments of drama.
Yeah, I love that saying that says there's a thin line between comedy and tragedy. You can, depending on where you lean it, it can go one way or the other.
It's true.
When did you first decide you wanted to become an actor?
When I was 5, it is funny because I have a 5-year-old now, and now I completely get it. I look at her like, "Oh my gosh, this girl's an actress. This girl is absolutely an actress." I gave birth to myself all over again. Seriously, she is so dramatic and so, yesterday she put on my high heels and she got a microphone. She's like, "Mommy, I'm on the red carpet. I'm on the red carpet."
Oh,
I was
no. Then you're like, "Well, where's your publicist? Is your publicist nearby to help you down the red carpet?"
Actually, some agents recently started reaching out to me about both of my girls, and I've been like, "Oh God, can I start this all over again with them?" So my husband and I are trying to decide that right now. But yeah, I mean, I was really young in the church. I started out doing church plays. Salty the Singing Songbook. That was that was the Christian like vacation Bible school character that like Christian homes are like, "Oh, well, you can't watch this and you can't watch that, but you can watch Salty." And so Salty like had all and it was PSAL,
Oh, I see. Okay.
almost like a singing Bible.
Oh,
So they had
wow.
musicals and all these things around Salty. So that's really how I started was like in the Christian musicals and then, ended up going to high school for performing arts and traveled all over the world with that. And I did my first TV show when I was 16. And then after
Wow.
that went to New York and, that started kind of the whole like New York stage and regional stage and traveling around and then starting in TV and then film.
Wow, amazing. You started from such a young age. What were some of the obstacles that you ran into on the way?
I ran into obstacles that I would say had to do with both faith and identity. When you have that personal relationship with God, it kind of opens the door for God to speak to you, right? And to speak to your identity. And a lot of times he'll introduce you to a version of you that you may have never even met yet. right? And that's a part of what I call a God dream. I encountered my God dream with the Lord pretty early. And so he started talking to me that one day you're going to be an actress and you're going to be on television and you're going to move to Hollywood and all these different prophecies. But at the same time, once I got old enough and got an agent, they were telling me you'll never make it in Hollywood. Hollywood is for beautiful people. You are not.
Oh my gosh.
And therefore, you need to stay in New York. You need to basically like know your place. Yeah. And there were times where I even like had offers to do certain things, but there might be nudity or this or that attached to it that I wasn't comfortable with. And so I would tell them, like, I really would love to do this project, but I don't feel comfortable doing nudity. And they would just let me have it, like, really let me have it, like, very bullying and like, well, you'll never be able to work if you're not willing to do this and that, then you'll never get to this place in your career, all these things. So as a young person starting out in the industry, I kind of went through it as far as trying to navigate my faith and what I believed God was showing me, and these things that I was being told that I must be or must not be, or, the way they painted it was like, I'm not important enough to have convictions. I'm not important enough to have things that I'm saying I don't feel comfortable doing. Like they're like, once you're at the height of your career, then you can say those things. So I really needed the Lord to help me to navigate those different circumstances, especially as a believer.
And how did you navigate through those?
A lot of prayer. I also, had a great support system. I would call people and I would ask them for wisdom and counsel but then there were times where even after getting everybody's opinion and even after hearing what everyone had to say, where God just would say like, come to me, I will show you. I can remember being offered my first role at 21 years old and like going into a whole fast and asking God, like, is this what you want for me? I just want what you want for me. That's what I want. I want to be on the path that you've created for me. And I feel like just keeping that posture all along the way has opened up doors that I never could have opened for myself, and also has made me okay with the doors that have closed because they weren't for me.
Sounds like you've been able to go through a lot of life challenges just with a peace in your heart, knowing that there is something beyond what was happening at that moment that you're trusting in, that you're looking toward.
I feel like I got the revelation pretty early on that this life is about purpose. And whether you're filming or whether you're feeding the homeless or whether you're singing at church or whether you're singing at Carnegie Hall, that you are still operating in some form of purpose. And I think that the fallacy of this industry is that if you're not employed at a certain time, or if you're not filming something, if you're not on stage, if you're not, whatever, if you're waiting tables or if you're a bartender, that you're just not operating in your purpose, right? Like that you're not doing what you were created to do if you don't have an entertainment opportunity. But I don't believe that. I don't believe that's true. I think that a lot of us have felt like that's true. I remember going through a season where I was just working all the time, working all the time, and very grateful for it. But then when I entered into that season where it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have a job, whatever. But I just started serving everywhere and I started volunteering and I started mentoring and I started, teaching kids drama and leading vision workshops for low income women. And that season was probably the most purposeful season of my life. And that it was in serving others that I came in contact with my own purpose. So now it may be in the hair and makeup trailer, or it may be, with my cast or crew or directors or producers, right? But like that same spirit of purpose just translates wherever I am. I think that's how you create a life, right? With kids or a husband or whatever, you create a life as opposed to something that's so myopically driven around whether or not you have a job and when you have a job and everything being surrounded by comparing your career to your purpose versus your life to your purpose.
What were some actor moments of victory that you never want to forget?
Even when I had just kind of come out of school and was in that place of, struggling and like, beating the pavement in New York and, just believing God that he would open up a door for me in this career I believe that he called me to. I started receiving from strangers these prophecies about working with Oprah Winfrey and working with Tyler Perry and all these things, and I'm like, "I don't know either one of them. I know who they are, but, like."
And when you say prophecies, what is that? What do you mean by that for people who aren't familiar with that?
Yeah, so people would literally strangers would stop me on the street, would stop me on the subway, would stop me like, one time I was even at this nightclub in a state that I'd never been to, and a woman stopped me, and she prophesied to me, meaning that she, like, called forth things that I was going to do. So she said, "You're gonna move to California." I was living in New York at the time. She started prophesying about my husband. I was single at the time. And she started prophesying that I was gonna work with Tyler Perry, whom I had never met at that point, and that I was gonna film at his studios in Georgia that I had never seen, right? So she's laid out all these things, and then she was like, "Okay, nice to meet you," and just, like, walked back into this club. And I experienced a lot of things like that, and so I feel like those are just different ways that God has revealed, "I have a dream over your life, and it's greater than your dream for yourself." And so I guess this journey has been for me about discovering what God is saying and internalizing it in faith, right? Especially when a lot of times what God says is like the opposite of how you feel. So it's meant to encourage you, it's meant to let you know, like, I know things are hard. I know things, difficult. I know it may be hard to see this vision based on where you are right now, but where you are right now is not where you're gonna end up. It's not the end, it's not the end. So for me, one big, like, amazing actor moment was fast forward 2019, I'm at Tyler Perry Studios at the grand opening of his huge studio soundstage there, or multiple sound stages there. Oprah Winfrey is there, and he presents me with a star on his newly minted Walk of Fame at the Tyler Perry Studios with Oprah present directly in front of the Oprah Winfrey soundstage with my
Mm.
name.
Oh
And
my
that was
gosh.
just such a beautiful moment of, just a full circle manifestation. I felt that way also when my family and I were moved to London to film a whole project, and my children ended up with British accents. And, it was just, we were treated like royalty. It was just the most beautiful experience. And even when I was doing Get Hard and we had a huge premiere at the Chinese theater, and while I was on the red carpet, I looked up and realized that I was standing in the exact spot as I had been 8 years prior when I received a prophetic word that God was gonna send me to Hollywood and that he was opening the door for me in Hollywood. And in the middle of that premiere is when I realized that I was standing in exactly the same spot as I was years prior when I received that
Mm.
prophecy. So for me, those like amazing actor moments that I don't want to forget are also connected to promises that God made me that when they came to pass, just kind of confirmed how real God was in my life.
And do you incorporate a lot of this into your book, The World Is Waiting for You? Because that's your debut book. Congratulations on that coming out. It's going to be really exciting. And did all those experiences inform what you brought to that book?
It absolutely informed it. If you think about just even those words, the world is waiting for you, right? It's like intended to call you out, to call you forward. A lot of times we live in the shadows, or, we can get discouraged or self conscious or afraid or, wonder, me, like me, I don't know. But what I discovered is that we all have a superpower. We all have a gift that God has given us. And there's a grand God dream that's over all of our lives. And if we can just tap into it and then partner with it in the manifestation of it, I believe that so many people are going to just be transformed as far as who they think they are, what they're capable of doing, and what they're actually going to do and who they're going to become in this world. And I'm excited about it because as you do what you're called to do, Alan, and as I do what I'm called to do, and as the listeners here do what they call to do, it's a domino effect, right? Of light. There's a chapter in the book called You Are a Star. And I really believe that we all are stars, that we are ignited with light to just light up the world, and that those places of darkness that we feel, that we see, that sometimes that's exactly where we're called to, right? To brighten that up. And so the world is waiting for you, and I'm excited that we're all going to experience it. And thank you for the love as far as my debut book.
Now, is your God dream only positive things? Is it could it be suffering? Like, I think of how often, I mean, not everyone is always in a life stage of everything going well. So how does suffering or kind of bad things work into discovering what your God dream is?
That's an excellent question. I mean, listen, I guess we can just go straight to Jesus, right? Like, Jesus had a calling to be exalted and on a throne and all these things, to be a savior of the world. But also, a part of that story was to be crucified and to be betrayed, right? And so there was absolutely suffering that was built into that grand story, into that God dream. And yes, normally we think of a dream as like just being flowers and just being rainbows and just being the things that we desire. Right. And I think that's the distinction between my personal dream, which has no pain attached to it, and a God dream. There's also a journey attached to it. And sometimes in the journey of manifesting God's dream over your life, there are places that are valley, right? It's not all mountaintop. But for me, one of the things I've discovered is that if you stay faithful and if you remain in obedience, even in those places that are hard, you will be rewarded. For me, after receiving that whole prophecy that God's going to open the door for me in Hollywood and I'm going to be a star and all these things. I mean, I was living in low income housing. I was struggling. I was like on the poverty line. Like all these things were happening in my life. And then one day I felt like the spirit was telling me to get up and go to this Bible study. I'm like, by the time I get on the bus, the train, do all these things, that Bible study is going to be over. But I did it just in obedience, not because I wanted to, not because I was not exhausted and tired, not because I felt like I had all this money to even pay for the bus or the train. And obedience did that. When I got there, I ended up encountering the very woman who was the creator of the show that brought me to Hollywood. It all happened as a result of being obedient to get up and go. So sometimes, even when we feel like we're in seasons that are painful, or we just want to quit, or, we just want to pursue our own vision, we don't realize that in that moment, God's using these things for our good. He's using these things for our good and to actually direct us to exactly what we've been praying for the whole time, what we've been envisioning the whole time.
How do you distinguish between your dream for yourself? Like, especially in Hollywood, it seems like the temptation is to have a life that orbits around yourself. You're at the center, your desires. I like what you said earlier about how, yes, our own dreams do not involve anything negative, any suffering. But how do you figure out this really is actually, I'm living out my dream rather than God's dream? How do you distinguish between the two?
For me, it kind of always goes back to surrender, right? Like a lot of times when I've been called to do things, even to write this book, The World is Waiting for You, it did not initiate with me. It didn't start with like, now I'm going to write a book and this is what it's going to be called. It literally was me responding to a calling. I knew God was calling me to write this book, and that I needed to surrender and do it, even though at that time I felt like I'm living my dream, right? Like I'm filming and I'm traveling and, these different things. So when the book came, it was, okay, God, well, tell me more. What is it that you're asking me to do? What is it that you're asking me to release? And that was a process. Same with motherhood. I was doing my thing. It was not this huge vision for me that I'm going to be a mom and all this stuff, but strangers started prophesying to me. God said you're about to have a baby. And at first I was kind of scared, to be honest. But it was in the surrendering that opened the door. And motherhood has been the greatest blessing in the whole world. And I'm amazed that I could have missed it if I was just going off of my dream and what I wanted for my life at that time. And so one thing about a God dream, it extends so far beyond you, right? So it's like years past where you currently are. and it's also thinking about many other people than you're thinking about. So I imagine that you starting this podcast, that part of it was you being creative, part of it was you having an outlet and like these wonderful things for you, but it was also you seeing a need, right? You seeing a need in the world that you wanted to help fill by serving others. And so I feel like a God dream, one way to also determine between your own dream and a God dream is it large enough to encompass others? Is it large enough to bless others through the fulfillment of it? Or is it simply self-serving? Because I have a feeling that if it's simply self-serving and that's it, there's no deeper purpose attached to it, then you may want to question, okay, is that my God dream?
Academy Award winning actress Viola Davis wrote the foreword to your book, and she has said this about you: Edwina is a life force. Once she comes into your life, it alters. How do you alter people's lives?
First of all, don't make me cry. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a person that genuinely loves people. I genuinely care about people and where they are. And, there's a gift that God has given me to be sensitive to the state that people are in, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional, whether it's spiritual, and be able to see a vision for them as far as where God wants to take them, like what that next place of elevation is in their lives, and to be able to speak into that and to help them get there. And so with Viola, even though I met her at a very young age, I was in college and I was mesmerized by her because so many of the plays that I was working on, listed in there, the original cast was always Viola Davis, Viola Davis, Viola Davis. But when God, brought us to a place where our paths collided, I would sit, with she and her husband for hours and talk to them about vision and we set a vision for their production company, and I helped them to create that and form that. And she talks about me some in her book, Finding Me, and some of those moments that we spent together. And I guess, as far as me, I think that just a part of my calling is to help people to reach theirs. I'm always grateful. A woman stopped me yesterday. I was at my daughter's basketball game, and this woman ran after me and she said, "You spoke a message 11 years ago that changed my life, and I remember every word." And she started to give every word of that message from 11 years ago. And she began to cry and she thanked me so much. And I got teary too, And so I think that maybe that's what Viola meant as far as like how do you help change people's lives, And I just think it's an honor and a privilege, to be honest.
You mentioned early on getting involved with your church and that helped inspire your acting journey. What does your spiritual journey look like?
I was raised in a Christian home. So I've been in church all my life, but I would say around college is when I really started questioning everything, right? I went to NYU and it was, very, very heavily academic. And I was taught by different professors that God is a social construct, that is kind of a created being, really by humans to explain that which is inexplicable. And so I would go home then and challenge everybody like, well, what is God and what does God mean and blah, blah, blah. And then so there were times where the question sort of came to me of, do you believe? Like just a very simple question, do you believe? And I realized that I had engaged in so much discourse and debate and, and like bringing home all these things I had learned, that simple question that a friend of mine asked me, do you believe? It was something about the tenderness of that really made me stop and think, "Do I believe?" And that's what opened up all of these very intimate spiritual experiences that I had had personally. It wasn't just because I was taught it. It wasn't just because I read it. It was because I experienced it. And when I experienced God for myself, that's when I realized, wow, this is my spiritual journey. That is very personal and that no one can explain away or take away what I've experienced.
And when your friend asked you, do you believe? What were they asking you that you believed in?
Well, I think that they were asking, do I personally believe in God? Because at that point, again, because I was in such an academic setting and I'm very analytical by nature. So I can debate with you to the hilt on the smallest thing. Some people are like, if you weren't an actress, you'd definitely be a lawyer or, something, because I will like go all the way in. And because I was doing that in the discourse of God at that point, that just happened to be the topic that, I was kind of like harping on, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And what about that? I think that she knew personally that she could not go to toe with me on all these things, right? That she didn't have an answer for all the things that I was posing. And so I think for her, I think it was just about that simple question of belief, right? Because believing is about internalizing something that you can't see. It may not be empirical. You may not have all the empirical evidence to prove this is what it is, right? So it takes an element of faith. And so I think that question of, do I have that faith or don't I? Right? Because some people tell you, no, I don't believe. I'll believe it when I see it, right? But then belief oftentimes is predicated by seeing, right? But there's two different types of seeing. There's seeing in the natural realm, and then there's seeing in the spiritual realm. And so I realized that, oh wow, I can believe because I've experienced things in a very spiritual way that were not necessarily birthed out of academics or birthed out of intellect, that were actually birthed spiritually, and I had the presence of mind to understand that.
How do you stay spiritually healthy while working in entertainment?
One thing that I've had to learn is that I can't idolize this industry, and that's hard. I think especially as actors or performers, right? We love what we do and we want to do it all the time. But at the same time, the way the industry is set up, it can be fickle, it can be this, it can be that. You may be on top and then on the bottom and then on top again and on the bottom. If you must be on top at all times, or you must be on set or whatever at all times, then you can start to develop an unhealthy relationship to it, where your whole entire identity is based around it. And so, like what I was saying earlier about purpose, for me to maintain a spiritual health, I've had to lean into my purpose that's bigger than my career. And so once I did that, I was able to attract and create a very healthy spiritual community of people that encourage me, that I encourage them, that we do life together, especially as far as spiritual health. I think that we need each other, right? Like we need connection. And that was another way I stay spiritually healthy, is by serving. I'm always, speaking and leading workshops and, just so many different things, especially here, for up and coming artists in LA and even in different parts of the world. I really try to pour into them what was poured into me. So that's a way also for me to stay spiritually healthy.
At the end of your life, what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind?
So basically, today, you're just giving all the simple questions. I love it. I'm one of those people that I wanna hear the words "well done." There's a million things I can be doing. There's a million things I do. But a lot of times these days, I will ask myself, okay, is this self-generated? Is this something that I'm just trying to do? Or is this something I'm called to? Because now I feel like it's the things that I'm called to that are going to have the greatest impact. And so for me, hearing those words, well done, means that you have fulfilled your assignment. The reason why you were born, the reason why you were created, the reason why you were sent into the world, you have fulfilled. And now it's time for you to be taken home. So when I think of those words, the world is waiting for you. You show up, right? You show up. And when your time is done, you know that you gave everything that you were supposed to give to this world. And now it's time for you to reap your reward.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for being my guest, Edwina. I loved hearing your thoughts and your story. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Edwina?
Sure. Well, I would love definitely for your listeners, follow me. I'd love to meet you. My husband and I have a nonprofit called Abundant Life U, and there's lots of ways to get involved. So you can send an email to team@edwinafindley.com. And buy the book. I hope that it blesses you. The World is Waiting for You is now available wherever you get your books: Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And you can visit me at edwinafindley.com.
If you work in entertainment, check out our groups, courses, and other resources available at navigatinghollywood.org. Please follow us and leave us a review so others can discover this podcast. You can find our other shows, transcripts, links, and more at navigatinghollywood.org. I look forward to being with you next time.